Hello and welcome to this place of Petrolheart propinquity. My name is not important, but those folks at Car Throttle, you know who I am. You know, some of you know where I am. And though some of you may wonder, I think mystery is marvelous, and I think you ought to enjoy this magnificent premiere episode of the Petrolhead and Petrolheart podcast. Now, originally, this was going to be titled Petrolhead, Petrolheart, but since when have we been rational people? Hence, the sole word of the name, Petrolheart. Now, today's topic is a hard one in the sense that it's difficult for me to communicate how personal it is for me. And I say this in the strangest way possible because the Datsun 510 is perhaps one of my favorite four-door cars of all time, not only because of what it is, but what it can be, and what it has been, and what it represents for the automotive industry as a whole. Now, for example, when the Datsun 510 entered the market in America, well, it was a risky bet, or at least it was seen as a huge gamble by the executives back there in the land of the rising sun. Why? Because its engine was 1.4 liters in size, the L14 Nissan engine. Now, for Japanese standards of the time, that was huge. That was humongous. So, the Datsun 510 was specifically designed for the American market, and it was a direct competitor of the BMW 2002. In fact, it was a cheaper version of the BMW 2002, and personally, I think it looks better, way better. The styling could be described as conservative with a pinch of cautious. It's basically a square box with rounded headlights, and it's beautiful that way. And here are some things, and this is the core of today's topic, that the Datsun 510 could teach the automotive industry of today. Perhaps one of the biggest lessons that the automotive industry of today can take away from the Datsun 510 is found within the simple ethos behind the Datsun 510, or rather the lack of an ethos behind it, because if we look at its styling, well, we realize there isn't one. There is no styling. It's just a functional set of boxes. It has square edges that, while may not be great for aerodynamics, provide a practical and even aesthetically pleasant, smooth, in a way, silhouette. It's conceptually smooth and has finesse, yet it has sharp, angled edges. But unlike all the sharp, edgy vehicles of today, it does not exude aggression. On the contrary, it merely exhibits confidence. It looks planted, it looks focused, and it looks simple, yet breathtaking. It's a great looking little car, one that I like very much, and I hope one day I can own one, because it is, quite literally, one of my dream cars. And this leads me to another big point I want to make here. The Datsun 510 is great, not just for what it was, or what it is as a car, as a vehicle, as a transport, but what it represents for the petrolhead tuning and customizing community. You see, in Japan, these things were got popular with age and are somewhat of a classic in some and understandably so. In the US, the same thing happens in the USA, and some people have them as track cars because they have a near 50-50 weight distribution, engine at the front, traction at the rear, and a big smiling piece of meat in the middle, to paraphrase Clarkson. Now, what I've just paraphrased was what Jeremy Clarkson said about the Jaguar F-Type. Oh, sorry, Jaguar for my American listeners. Jaguar for the civilized world. I kid, but what Clarkson said about the F-Type applies here tenfold. It's a simple car, but within that simplicity, it's an opportunity for the owner, the driver, the tuner to infuse it with complexity, with taste, with modifications. Tuners in Japan have gone about modifying these little cars in a myriad of ways. Some swap in SR20 DET turbo Nissan engines, some go about I think there are even rotary, like with 13B Mazda turbocharged, or I think they use 12Ps out of a first gen RX-7. I mean, there are people who even LS swap these little cars, and that's a good thing because it shows, it's evidence of how well thought out this car is, because it's not just a car, it's the platform that a car should be. And it has no modern equivalent. That's what really hurts me as a petrolhead, that the Datsun 510 has no modern equivalent. So, quick recap. What can the industry of today learn from the car that was the start of yesteryear? Simplicity. It works. Make it a canvas. You'd be surprised at the paintings that will arise. And another important thing, make it practical. The Datsun 510 is infinitely practical. For a car of that size, it has great boot space. It can seat 4 in its 4-door configuration. It can even seat 5 if one of them is a child. And it is practical as a daily driver. It's small enough to be parked. It's really usable. It gets good fuel economy, great mileage because of the small displacement and because of its lightness. It's a really lightweight car, not exceeding 1,000 kilograms. Now that is lightweight. Now lightness is a point I really want to make clear to today's manufacturers, even in this age of nanny security and safety and health systems. Like, you need tire pressure sensors because no one can bother themselves to, I don't know, step outside of their cars and check tire pressures. And they're not even the track day kind of sensors where they show you the pressure and temperature. No, it's just a warning light on your dashboard that says, hey idiot, go change your tire. And that's what really bothers me. That technology is used to hinder the driver instead of helping. All the little itsy bits of technology in the 510s, and there isn't much in the way of technology, but every bit of engineering in that car is oriented to making the driver more aware. There is visibility, and that's another point. Visibility everywhere. Thin A-pillars, which now, for safety reasons, can't be as thin, but still, You have to strive for a comfortable driving position, good visibility, lightness, good fuel economy, not because your engine is wimpy, but because your engine doesn't have to lug around 500 extra kilograms of circuitry and leather seats. And that brings me to another lesson the auto industry could take from the 510. And that is ease of repairing and the reliability of it. Now, nowadays, cars are sure reliable, but it's not easy to work on them. You need a scan tool, and granted, an OBD2 scan tool helps a lot. But what happens when you have diagnosed a problem and you realize you have to take apart half the engine to change an oil filter? Now, that's crazy. So why not have a symbiotic relationship with from machine to technology? Why not have that symbiotic relationship between machine and technology controlling it, rather than technology being a parasite leeching off the soul of our cars? Now that is what bothers me, that technology has been infused into our cars to leech off their soul, to corrode it, bit by bit to erode it, smoothly, slowly, caressing it with their evil touch. The electronic tentacles wither away the little heart our modern cars possess. But it shouldn't be that way. The technology should be there to help the car, not to hinder the driver. Technology should be there to communicate the car with the driver, not to separate them. And that is what it has to be. But that is not what it is nowadays. Now, so far in this podcast or in this episode, we've covered lightness, we've covered practicality, we've covered the soul of the car, the communication with the driver. And this really ties in with the 510. Another thing manufacturers could learn from: make the cars communicate with the driver. And this is not done by removing technology. No, it's done shaping the technology to communicate rather than remove or place a barrier of communication. And I've said this before, I talked about this before, but I really, really want to make a point of it because I think this is the most important lesson manufacturers could learn from the 510. This and my following point. The other really important thing here is good handling. And I'm not talking about cars that, and I'm not talking about all cars. Clearly, some cars are not meant to handle. I mean, I would not expect a 700 plus horsepower Hellcat Challenger to handle like a Mazda Miata. But I'm saying the cars that are meant to handle should have a natural, direct feel, something that is intuitive to the driver. Again, with the communication between man and machine, between driver and car. Each person, each driver must feel, think, and experience a bond while driving. No matter the car, the bond has to be there and has to communicate. You have to feel the G-forces through your spine, the steering feedback as the wheel is caressed by your fingers, the light resistance of the gas pedal while you floor it just before you enter a corner, downshift, little dab on the brakes to plant the front, and then you turn in. That kind of feel, that kind of sensation must be elicited from the driver by the car. And we're at the 15-minute mark, which means there's little time left for us because a longer podcast would bore you to death and a shorter podcast would be just meaningless. So let us think, what else does the 510 have to offer? Reliability, we've discussed reliability, lightness, handling, communicating with the driver, technology not being a hindrance. Perhaps the only thing the Datsun 510 does not do is safety. But when you think about it, the Datsun 510 is safe in the way that it allows the driver to be aware of the surroundings, of their surroundings. So the Datsun 510 is safe while it doesn't crash. And that is the problem of modern cars. Modern cars are engineered with a crash in mind. Now, I have nothing against safe practices and preparing for the worst. But I do have something against this lingering feeling I get that all of those cars are going to end up being crashed by someone who doesn't appreciate what a car is. I don't want to crash my car. It has happened to me. I've crashed and it doesn't feel good, even though the car protected me and the occupants. The occupants and I left unscathed. The car is my project car and it's sitting at my aunt's house at an undisclosed location, which I have now just disclosed. Damn it. So, I'm saying the 510 is safe because it gives you the opportunity to not crash. But cars nowadays are practically inviting you to do it. Because this mentality of irresponsible driving, of preparing for the worst because people are not willing to make an effort to do their best, that is scaring me. The whole ideology about that companies are turning to autonomous driving simply because people can't be bothered to enjoy something as beautiful as wielding a four-wheel steed. Now that's something I don't get, and that's something I will probably never understand, how some people don't enjoy the drive. I'm not saying we should all be saying track day bro and going to the racetrack all the time, but I certainly enjoy driving. Even in the heaviest traffic, I always find something to do. When I cannot go fast, I hypermile because it's entertaining and because it's good on gas and it's being gentle with the car and it reduces wear on many parts. When I have the opportunity, I'd ride fast because I like driving fast. So let me be clear about this. The 510 has a lot to teach all of us, not only the auto industry. Reliability, lightness, nimble handling, practicality, and overall, one thing that should be made clear. The Datsun 510 is the perfect example of Zen philosophy properly infused in a car. Why? Because it has no philosophy. It is devoid of meaning because it's waiting for the driver to give it said meaning while tracing a line through each corner of life. That, my friends, has been the first episode of Petrolheart. See you again.